My name is Keith Garner. My position, I am currently a consultant. I was lucky enough over the past couple of years, I was on the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit development team, and I was worked with Mike Niehaus on various products, versions of MDT. Up until a couple months ago. It's been taken over by a new team. Actually, it's been taken over by the configuration manager team. And they just announced it, what was that, yesterday, I believe? New versions of MDT coming out, so we're excited about that. Right now, I'm kind of doing some contracts at Microsoft working on proof of concept kits, which is great because actually that's what this is about. This presentation was originally designed by Richard Smith. He's a consultant, solutions architect in the UK, and he's actually going to be giving this presentation at TechEd Europe coming up here in a couple of weeks. But he couldn't attend this session, so I decided to take over this session for him, which is great because most of this content is stuff that I'm working on right now. This is really good stuff. We're going to be talking about today. Going to be going over a couple of things related to, well, pretty much the whole concept of image release management. How do we create images? How do we go gather requirements? How do we go through all the processes here? It's I've been doing it for the past couple of years now, working on imaging. I've worked occasionally back and forth, working within Microsoft, working on imaging tools like MDT, and then I get to go out to the field as a consultant. I get to go out and talk to customers. And I got to work at a couple of sites, a couple of external customers. I even got to work with Microsoft's own IT department, helping them design their core image and their core requirements and trying to get them ready for Windows 8. This was last year at this time for the Windows 8 back when it was in beta. Everything was really exciting and fun and crazy all at the same time with that. But the goal is we want to be able to walk through and talk about most of this, the process of creating an image and how do we find out what we need, how do we go out and actually gather all the components, and how do we actually then deploy that as well. For the image engineering process, really it's broken down into these 3 steps that we want to actually start tackling. Identify the requirements for the master image, all of the components, all the pieces, and really what it's about. There's some very fundamental questions that we're going to want to ask as we go through this. When we're done actually creating the master image, we're done gathering the requirements, then we actually want to start creating the image. And for the past couple of years, it's really been great. Microsoft, at least Microsoft Consulting Services, when they will go out to meet with customers and talk to really the recommended way to actually build images is with the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. And with Windows 8, MDT 2012 Update 1 is that tool. From there, the goal is that the advantage of MDT is that we can use it to automate our processes. If done properly, we can install MDT on a server, add our components in, and then do some tweaks, and we'll show you some demos here in a little bit of how that can work out. But if done correctly, we can create an automated process for constructing an image, and that's what MDT was designed to do. They gather all the components, start the scripting, and kick off some automated installs. So we create a consistent, repeatable image that can be used in our environment and repeated as necessary. We created one particular image, but there's something broken on that. Well, let's go ahead and find the bug and fix that. Or even better, Microsoft Patch Tuesday comes up. Maybe your IT organization decides we need to make sure that our image is standardized and contains the latest patches. That's a high requirement for when it goes out. When it goes out in every single machine, it is already patched and up to date with the latest thing. Latest Microsoft updates. We can create an MDT process that will not only addition to installing the operating system, maybe some applications like Office and a couple other business line of applications, but also run Windows updates so that hopefully if done done automated process, I can sit there, and at least with Microsoft IT, when we worked with them, their particular process was we would define all the scripts, and then when a new build of Windows came out, we got new beta copies of Windows, I think, once every 2 weeks. Things would break, things would change, we have to change our processes, new features would show up, new UI components would appear. But as it comes in, we would create a virtual machine, spin it up, create our standardized image, latest patches, everything else, maybe patches for Office, other applications, take a snapshot, and we're done. That was all completely automated. If done properly, I could be able to click on the virtual machine, start it up, and go home for the night and come back in the morning, and I should have about either 1 or 5 images already created. And automation is also important. We want to automate as much as possible. That isn't always possible. Sometimes there are some manual steps that we may want to do. There are, for example, the start screen. We'll have a little demo here in a little bit about that, about how we can add some manual steps. But typically, I like to at least, when creating the base image, add some, try to automate as much as I can such that we can create the standardized images pretty much on a weekly basis, and it's not that much extra effort because it's an automated process. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the gathering of the requirements for the master image. So what does that mean to gather requirements and collect some of the basic questions? Well, one of the basic questions is what kind of operating system do we want here? Do we want, one of the questions may be basic, 64-bit or 32-bit. And this is actually a tough question. I've come across companies, and even within Microsoft IT, they had a serious debate about whether or not they should standardize on one or the other, which is a good question. And there are pros and cons to either point. One of the points, at least with Microsoft IT, for example, is every single machine that's on the Microsoft IT hardware standards had 4 gigabytes of RAM or more. In fact, a lot of machines would have 6 or 8 gigs. You go down to Best Buy or grab most consumer machines, a lot of them have 6 gigabytes. And as you know, if you're running a 32-bit operating system, if you are running a 32-bit version, you can't use the full 4 gigabytes and above. You must have a 64-bit operating system if you want to use 4 gigabytes or more. That's a problem. Also, why don't we always go to the 64-bit operating systems? Let's just standardize on that one. Well, there's also some problems there. Maybe you have older machines that have 2 gigabytes of RAM or less, and performance is a problem. Maybe we should stick with the 32-bit version. But there's also probably the biggest reason to stick with 32-bit operating system is application compatibility. A 64-bit doesn't have the 16-bit virtual machine, so we can't run 16-bit Windows 95 applications, for example. And for some companies, that may be a problem. And also we might find that some applications, some drivers just don't work on, you don't have it ready or compatible with 64-bit. Maybe you have a old, maybe a point-of-sale device or something like that has a printer that's connected to it. They didn't update the printer drivers for 64-bit. It's only available for 32-bit. These are real questions. But generally, one particular note I have, and this is my pro tip, I should say, my recommendation is to do both, even if you think you want one or the other. One particular problem is that typically a deployment imaging process or rollout to a new operating system, if you're going from XP to a new operating system like Windows 7 or Windows 8, it could take about a year to do the proper planning, analysis, and more likely testing and pilots out in your company. Most of the problems that you're trying to go at and get at and trying to identify are application compatibility problems. In most cases, maybe your group's already starting to use Windows 7 or modern operating system 64-bit version. I know that Office, for example, there are some accounting departments that have to have 64-bit version of Office because they need those Excel spreadsheets to load huge spreadsheets so they can do big calculations and numbers. But for the most part, what I try to do, at least when I go into companies, I will try to do, when I create packages, when I load up applications, when I load up everything, at the very beginning, let's load up both. Let's always load up the 64-bit and 32-bit operating systems. Let's go ahead and install applications into both task sequences, make them available for both. Let's go ahead and get a process going where we're creating standardized images and in our virtual machines for both at the same time. You know, so hopefully, if done properly, you're solving most of these problems and you're identifying that they work for both. Maybe as you continue on over the life cycle of evaluating a new operating system like Windows 7, you'll decide, oh, we really now know that we need to standardize on 32-bit because of our application issues. Or no, we don't really have that many application issues, but we really do have modern hardware that we need to support. Or you may actually find, you know something, we're both. We have our manufacturing division requires 32-bit because they have require access to older machines, older peripherals that require the old 32-bit drivers, and our accounting groups require 64-bit. So actually, we're going to need both. So my recommendation is do consider trying to do both if you can, because hopefully you'll find out as the process goes what you really need, but you don't want to get to a point where you decided to do 32-bit and then 6 months later down the road you realize, oh no, we really did need the other version as well, and then you have to start recreating that from scratch. If you have a process where you're creating both at the same time and maintaining both at the same time, you'll probably, I think you'll do a better job of actually being ready for both. Then we have a kind of a problem of thick, thin, or hybrid. This is also a bit of a debate, and actually kind of there are certain philosophies. Some people think about thick or thin. What is thick or thin? A real thin image will be pretty much just the one you got out of the box from Microsoft. So when you went out and bought or you downloaded the ISO image or the VHD, the WIM file from Microsoft from the volume licensing site, or you went out and bought a disc at Best Buy or something like that. That is a very basic image of Windows 7 or Windows 8. That's ready to go. And in fact, that's the ultimate thin image. It's ready to run. Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, Configuration Manager, all these tools we can either put applications into our basic image, or we can just say, let's install it at deploy time. And there is a balance that needs to be considered when deciding whether to put it in the core image or whether to put it in at deployment time. For Microsoft IT, they had a slightly different issue. Most Microsoft employees know how to install software on their machine, so most of them, and as for trying to standardize, we're talking about a software development company, so people are installing software willy-nilly from just anywhere. Sometimes it's beta software, it's software that they've written. Wow, it's going out all over the place. So Microsoft didn't have a centralized system for managing the software versions on everybody's machine. That was definitely up to each individual user. But they wanted to have at least a core base image that can be rolled out that contained a core of what everybody needed. And for Microsoft, of course, they have a site license for Office. So pretty much our standard Windows 8 image contained Windows 8, either x86, x64, Office built in, and probably other couple of applications that were ready to go. So this was kind of more of a hybrid. This was a very thin, middle-of-the-road image. Then you may have a very thick image. And this is a great example for a company that, say for example, you have a call center, or you have a training lab, and you know what software versions, what packages go on every single machine. We don't need to ask anybody. We don't need to do that dynamically. In fact, we want it for speed. We want to install quickly, ready, have ready to go right away. So let's install Office, install our lab applications. Let's install all these things into our base image so it's ready to go. But there may be some questions about where things go. So that'll need to be discussed. I have some more slides about that in a little bit. Also, the other question might be, well, how do we want to roll this out? And then how will this actually be deployed? Microsoft Deployment Toolkit can construct images that can be consumed by a variety of sources. This is just the images that are created should be compatible with anything. In fact, we can take that image and actually burn a new, take the existing Windows 8 install retail CD, replace it with our custom image, and redistribute it out again so people can go through the standardized Windows out-of-box experience if you wanted to. Or you could put it on a WDS server, just pretending like it was ready to go. Or you deploy it out using Microsoft Deployment Toolkit again, or Configuration Manager, or any other tool out there. But now we have a question about which tool we want to use. If we're deploying it out using a very basic WDS, now we have to worry about, well, there's no options for selecting optional components, drivers, or other things like that. So now we have to worry about actually including those in the basic image. If you're talking about Configuration Manager, great. Now we need to talk to our Configuration Manager guys. I don't know if you're on the same team or if that is you. If you're involved in both imaging and actual deployment, you may want to decide, hey, we want to put more things in the base image, or no, we've decided for business case that this should be actually be rolled out using Configuration Manager or at deploy time. So you'll have to work with, on the deployment sides, to find out that line between where we want to install here or there. A classic example might be, say, for example, Adobe Acrobat Reader. That hasn't been updated in years. Well, they update it very, very frequently. So do we want to put that in our core image? Now, if we're updating our core image pretty regularly, yeah, maybe it could be up to date. But maybe you may have a quarterly or yearly refresh cycle for your images that we only want to update it every once in a while. So why would we put Adobe Acrobat Reader, which changes every like 3 months or something like that, into our core image? Maybe we want to deploy that dynamically at deploy time. So that's kind of a question we need to ask. Office is probably the big one for deciding, and it used to be, I think, for Office 2010, when Service Pack 1 came out, I think if you installed Office dynamically, it could take an hour to install Office over the network. Maybe I had a slow network at the time. Install Office, install the service packs, patch it up, get it running. Wow, that was an excellent candidate for putting in the image and actually having that slow process run in the background. For Microsoft and most of the companies I work at that have volume licensing agreements with Microsoft, everybody was entitled to a version of Office anyway, so just go ahead and slap it in and just give it out to everybody. Don't even worry about it. So that was so at least for the older versions of Office, installing in the image was really the way to go. Go ahead and run setup. There are tools available from Office on how to actually do a full installation and how to select options, how to remove things. They've really done a great job with the kit. Then, so the other option is to deploy it dynamically. The problem is, of course, that we're trying to download that 1.2 gigabyte package. MDT, Configuration Manager, a lot of the deployment mechanisms out there are smart enough in many cases to do some tricks when it comes to alleviating bandwidth. MDT, for example, can do multicast. So if you have a huge lab and fast network, rather than sending out literally 100 copies of MDT all at once, we'll do multicast where we send out one copy and all the clients listen in no matter where they are. It's really cool technology. I've upgraded 100 machines all at once, and they've all take about probably a matter of probably about 10 minutes to do a full install, to do a full copy of a 6 gigabyte image that comes down. Multicast is really cool in that respect, and that's also other techniques are available for Configuration Manager as well. But if we're installing Office dynamically over the network, we're just connecting to a network share and trying to download it, we do have to worry about that. That may be okay in some environments. Maybe you have a couple of cases where you have some users who require the 64-bit version of Office, but they're very few. You only have those accounting people who there are only about 50 of them that want to download it. Maybe that's an option you want to take, but do need to be aware of that. There's also another option. There are some really cool features in the latest version of Office that have to do with virtualization and other options. So install Office as a LIS, local local storage. So the idea is that we're actually putting Office, the install bits, on your image in the WIM file, but it's not actually installed in the product. The idea is that, at least with the newer versions of Office, they can do some really cool things with, for example, you could have multiple versions of Office on the same machine. So if you have compatibility issues, you want to have old Office 2010 on for some application compatibility, the new Office 13 can coexist with that version. So, and using some of the new Microsoft virtualization options. But we don't want to virtualize it over the network. We actually put it on the local hard disk. It's just an install directory. And dynamically at runtime, we can decide, okay, now we actually want to install that for this particular user. This particular user requires that. So we gain the benefit of the downloading of the content over multicast and saving that during installation, but we don't lose the feature and functionality of Office. Now, so this is a kind of a busy slide here, and it kind of describes some of the levels as we're going up here and I don't know about the different layers, but there are some. We'll start off on the bottom here. Let me see if I can understand this here, explain this. At the very basic level, we have Windows 8. The operating system, and we do need to support hardware. We do need to address hardware issues when understanding installing the operating system. For example, if you have BIOS or if you have new UEFI machines, that will come into play with actually how your BIOS, your image is created. We'll have some core utilities, of course, Flash, Adobe Flash, Shockwave Player, the Adobe Acrobat Reader. It seems like that's absolute requirement. In fact, Windows 8 includes that in most in the images in the product nowadays. And Visio Viewer, that's actually a good one. So I didn't think about it. Firewall and antivirus client. Wow, that's also important when considering what to go in. And there's a bit of a debate there with antivirus as well. We of course want antivirus to be ready right away, but of course antivirus bits, the definition files are changing on a weekly basis, hopefully, to identify new threats and new threats to address those. So we want to make sure that also we have this combination of making sure that the core antivirus is ready, but also at deploy time we are forcing the machine to be updated as well. Office, whether it's full install or local install bits, that's another great question. And then System Center or whatever configuration management client, your configuration management system you're using to keep machines up to date, ready, inventoried, and patched. Then we can start talking about updating some of the like the drivers, languages. Microsoft Deployment Toolkit supports installation of various different languages as well. So Configuration Manager. So at least with Microsoft, for example, we only created a English base image. And at deploy time, we would add in language packs for most of our major subsidiary sites. For some reason, we would do German, French, Chinese, Japanese. We didn't do Spanish for some reason. I didn't understand why. There was a specific reason for that. But that should be ready to go. If you from those particular sites, you should be able to then log on, complete the wizards, and get select the appropriate language packs. And pow, your machine was running in a localized version of Windows. So that should be addressed, at least targeted and ready to go in the image. Drivers are important because, I mean, if the machine can't boot, if we don't have network or storage, we can't get the rest of the drivers to download. So we'll do need to address that as well. Then we're talking about some of the other application layers of what we want to install on top of that. Now we can actually start asking ourselves, we have our core image defined. Now we need to actually grab some business user requirements about what we want. Do we want to install QuickTime, Acrobat Reader, WinZip? Do we want to install our business applications for various groups like SAP or other areas? And then targeting also for individual users. I have worked at some companies that they're very good about defining getting a full listing of every user and the applications they required. Everybody in the company, they knew exactly what was installed in their desktop. And it was crazy too. They, if you call up the help desk and said I had a problem, they would say, okay, reboot your machine. I still have a problem. Okay, we're going to reimage it. Gone. They also, that took quite a bit of discipline too, because they also required that every user made sure that for every desktop they had network map drives for individual personal folders and group folders. So thou shall always save your files off to the network share, because at any one particular time your machine could get broken, lost, stolen, or reimaged. We may decide that your machine needs to be reimaged. But it took a amazing level of discipline to work that in the company and get buy-off for various groups to say, hey, you can't store local files on your desktop and you can't install it by yourself because where you may have to image your machine at any time, which is crazy. So from the image engineering requirements process, we should be able to gather various components, various pieces to help define what our approved image design is. We're doing the basic image design requirements. What do we want to do? Windows 8, Windows 7, Windows 8.1, x86, x64, enterprise, volume licensing, blah, 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 blah. How are we going to deploy this out? What are our apps? Who's responsible for the apps, the image or the actual deployment mechanism? Do we want some branding? Yes, we want our corporate logo, or we want cute bunnies on the screen. I don't know. Do we want and security standards? Very important. Are we interested in antivirus programs? Are we going to be worried about anti-malware programs? Everything else. And what group policy design? Group policy design is, sorry, actually that should have been earlier on the slide because that is important. There were some definite work we did, for example, at Microsoft to decide, of course, there were some schema changes with Windows 8. We had new features and functionality. And we also had the problem that there were large portions of people at Microsoft who installed it on their own. They didn't install the standardized corporate image. They wanted to install it directly from the Windows product group, or they actually had to do some other scenario that required testing. They required some special languages or some other special features. And that happens in a software testing environment. But if they're on our corporate network, and if they want to join the domain, you're going to have to worry about group policy. You're going to have to worry about complying with security. We're going to run some checks. We're going to make sure this machine's patched and up to date. You better believe it. So how important is it then that all the patches, all the registry tweaks, all the desktop changes need to go into our base image? Maybe we actually want to make sure that our group policy design is set up properly to get there. Or maybe we want a combination of both. We want to get the base image partway set up, and then for the final little push, we'll also verify that the base image is compliant with our corporate requirements and that the users are are so that they're covered both ways. Even if they're using your base custom image and they decide not to join the domain or a test domain, they're covered. Or if they use their own image and join to the domain, they're covered with the group policy design. But making sure that you're working in conjunction with your Active Directory group policy folks. Microsoft has actually gone out and worked to create some jump starts, I should say, to help solve some of these problems. I kind of gave an overview of some of the things you have to worry about, and wow, that's quite a bit to remember. Microsoft Consulting Services went out, and for their own consultants who go out and talk to people at people outside and everywhere who need to answer these questions, they have PowerPoint slides, checklists, questions and answers, frequently asked questions that you can get and download. And let's see if I can find that here. The website for that is at least something I've just been started to work on. The Connect site, connectmicrosoft.com, and there's a site, POC Jumpstart. So this should all be in the video available when we come out here. But it's a proof of concept Jumpstart offer. From here, there are different programs that we can look at. We can look at management. We can look at desktop virtualization. There's also older modules for Windows 7 as well. Windows 7 is still perfectly valid if you're still on XP. Microsoft wants you to get off of XP. It's the end of life coming up in less than a year. And there are some scenarios where Windows 7 is perfectly valid, and there's some scenarios where you may want to jump to Windows 8 as well. That's a good question for your corporate for your image evaluation. But if we go down to core module, I can click on the core module for Windows 8, and there's Windows 8 core POC module delivery material, 10 or 15 day. Let's see, download details. There is a lab guide, some jumpstart for sales. That's more of a question of what do we want to do, how do we want to do this, and actually delivery guides. This is 42 megabytes of, wow, slides, forms, documentation that are ready to go. And the interesting thing here is there's also this hydration 6.zip file. That is 17 gigabytes in size. One of the cool things is here, what it can do is if we go through the process of filling out the forms and and go through the material, we should have some XML definition files that can help us hydrate or build out an MDT environment. In fact, there are eval versions of Windows 8 Enterprise eval, Windows Server eval, and Configuration Manager eval version. There's like 3 or 4 eval versions. The idea is that this will spin up, build, I think it's like 5 or 6 virtual machines. Inside the first virtual machine will be a domain controller. Inside the second virtual machine will be an MDT server. And then another virtual machine will be a configuration manager server. All configured, ready to go, with task sequences predefined, operating systems imported, and a couple of client virtual machines that we can click and start and construct images. This is used by Microsoft consultants to speed up the process of creating a standardized environment. Now, the particular problem is that it's going to be, you're going to be working for the Contoso Corporation. So all the branding in this environment is for Contoso. The idea is that you should be able to start, look at it, I understand what they're doing here. They're actually installing the Contoso background image, and that's where, there it is, there's contoso.jpg file. I can go in and modify that with my corporation's file and start tweaking this, modifying this, evaluating it. But remember, one of the biggest problems with evaluation, with migrating to a new operating system, is application compatibility. But this is a great way to start actually addressing those application compatibility problems. Hopefully, this should include Office, Windows, and I think a couple other applications here that are ready to go. but it should help you at least get if you have couple of test machines, we can load up this up on a couple of test machines, do some evaluations, load up our application suites, do some tests, pound on those and make sure that those are working. But the idea was, this is what they call a 10 or 15 day delivery. The idea is that within 10 or 15 days, 2 or 3 weeks, we should be able to go through, and there's also a 5-day as well, we should be able to stand up an environment, start off with doing some sample deployments, walking through. It's going to list Contoso. Actually deploy this to machines. These are eval versions, so they'll expire after, I think, 90 or 180 days, depending on which product we're talking about here. So you can't use this for your full rollout. But at least you can then get a start of, now I understand what we're doing here. And that's how a deployment works. This is what the dialogues look like. And now I know what I really want. That sucks. That doesn't work. This is what we want. This is great, but we do need to fix that. Great. Now you actually have a jump start of actually doing this. Now I downloaded, from here, I downloaded the lab guides here as well. Let's see if I have those here. There we go. One of the things we have, for example, is a info path form that we can start driving some of the requirements. So all the things that we asked earlier about, so the customer name is going to be Contoso. If I could spell right today. Up late last night. Contoso Corp. This is the image creation service. This is an info path form. This is, many of you are familiar with these. We can type in information and save these to XML files. But the goal is that we're going to start going through and asking most of these questions. We're going to start filling in. What do we think we want? We're definitely going to want Windows 8 Enterprise. We have a volume license site. We want to try both 32-bit and 64-bit. We'll decide what we really want later. What kind of patches are we deciding about? What kind of features do we want in Windows 8? The advantage of a form like this, this is literally all of the features that you can click on in Windows and to enable. This forces us to walk through and actually look at everything and collect it. Because I'm sure that maybe you're working in an environment, your boss said, we need to upgrade to Windows 8. Go gather requirements for that. Okay, well, how do we go ahead and grab requirements? How do we go ahead and find out what's available even? This is a great starting point for at least listing what is available. One of the things here in our demo gathering as we move forwards here, there are companion PowerPoint slides available as you're going through this that should answer every one of these questions as well. So look and feel, if we have questions about custom branding, how the logos work, Windows, Microsoft Office, what kind of versions we want, other applications, Shockwave, and then we can go ahead and add our own in. Now, one of the cool things also, there are a couple of forms in here available. When done properly and we collect that information, that will actually be consumed by the scripts that actually build out our demo environment. So we should be able to connect up. Now, I must admit there's a little bit of learning curve with this. So one possibility, if you're working with a Microsoft consulting services group, make sure that they're using this. If you're dealing with a private consultant, you can kind of demand that if they're not asking the correct questions that they can use this, or if you are a consultant, please go ahead and use this content. It's available. But also, if you're just doing this independently as well, this is a great starting point for at least collecting the requirements that the questions that you're going to have to answer at some particular point. Let's go ahead and close that out. Great. So our next step, we want to actually, now that we've gathered requirements, we've looked at this, we actually want to start talking about some of the basics here. So building reference image, just the kind of the background technical points that we want to discuss here. Some of the steps that we want to do, we want to build various components. We need to collect pieces and parts from all over the place. One of the things that we want to do, for example, is for those of you who are familiar with Windows XP, Windows XP installation can be automated using an unattended TXT file, for example. So text, INI files that we can use to drive the process. Windows Vista, Windows 7, Windows 8 have unattended XML files, and they're a little bit harder to modify. In fact, I don't recommend modifying them. If you're not using MDT, MDT and Configuration Manager have a built-in templates ready to go that are default and handle most everything. But if you're not using that, then the Windows product group has provided a toolkit called the Windows Sim, the image manager that can go ahead and modify and construct an unattended XML file that's properly formatted. It takes a bit of time, but there are guides to go through with that if you need to. If you wanted to, for those of you who remember the old DOS boot floppy days, we don't like DOS anymore. The DOS is old. We need a modern operating system that we can get access to the local hard disk and the network. WinPE is that method. It's a small, lightweight operating system. If you don't have MDT, you can go ahead and construct this manually, write your own scripts to do this, but that's available in the ADK, the Windows ADK, or the previous versions was Windows Wake. Then we're talking about capturing media. Now, for those of you who are using XP, probably familiar with Ghost and other tools like that. Stick in the floppy or connect over the network, run the Ghost tool to capture a GHO file. Windows has a tool called ImageX or DISM that creates WIM files. WIM files are pretty much the same thing as it's just an archive of a volume drive that we've collected all the files in. The difference between Ghost and the Wake and WIM files are that Ghost is sector-based, is taking a snapshot of the entire disk, whereas ImageX is only taking a snapshot of the files. It's file-based, so it's more like a zip file in that respect. There are some pros and cons to both. The ImageX, by gathering, sometimes you're wondering, well, what about recapturing the sector files and all the other components? The Windows will automatically construct those boot sector files necessary. All we're interested in is collecting the files and making sure that those are available. Also, we don't have to worry about different disks, because different sizes of volumes, because they all should just work. We're just copying files and extracting files back and forth, as compared to a sector base where we may have to muck with that and change around some of the sector information. Then we need to go back into, we create a reference image, and we need to construct an XML file to create our reference image. But now we need to construct an unattended XML file to deploy our image that we've created. So now we have to go back into the Windows System Image Manager if you don't have MDT. Also, if you don't have MDT, we will also migrate settings. So if you're running on an old box of Windows XP, and we want to copy all the registry settings, all the files, save that off into a location, install the new operating system, and restore it with all the registry settings and files. Microsoft provides a toolkit, the User State Migration Toolkit, to do that. But standalone, you have to go in and figure the command line settings, how to copy the files, how to specify which volumes, which directories, which files to copy. If you're not using MDT or Configuration Manager, you have to do that manually. And then how do we then extract out the contents that we just copied from a reference image and deploy that out? Then again, we have to use tools to extract that out. We could write scripts to go ahead and do all these. So we can write scripts and tools to go out and do all these tasks manually, and we can go ahead and do that manually if you don't have tools like MDT or Configuration Manager. These are the standard processes that are used by Windows Vista, Windows 7, Windows 8, 2008, including the server OSs as well, Windows Server 2008, 2008 R2, 2012, and the new stuff as well. But really, wow, that's a lot of stuff to do. I don't have time to reinvent the wheel and script this, so what other options are there available? And that's where I was pretty much talking about this Microsoft deployment toolkit that's used here. The team lead for the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, Mike Lewis, used to describe this as MDT makes all these individual components appear that they were designed to work together. Otherwise, you would have to go out and actually try to figure out how to patch these together. But the idea is that we want to make all these appear seamless, work well together, and make the process easy. MDT is this platform. It starts off with a deployment share, and really it's just a file share. Configuration Manager has some integration there as well, but the idea is that we're just using a machine. I actually installed MDT on my workstation over here, my laptop, and it's just a file share. Tab over. Did I close it already? Yeah, closed it. It's just a file share that we're going to install components like the operating system, applications, device drivers, scripts, all the components necessary to construct the image and or actually deploy that out to machines. When we've collected all of our components, so we can then create a task sequence, which is a sequence of steps of tasks, which is just really command line action that we're running processes to do various tasks like format the hard disk, copy this file down, extract out this package, run this setup program, go, do this, do that. From that, we'll also use a rules engine, so we'll have some text, some rules that we want to define, some environment variables. We'll ask Wizard, we'll collect some more information, we'll run a task sequence that's completely automated, and hopefully we should have some processes that work at the end. So MDT can be used in a couple of different ways. Primarily, and Microsoft Services will recommend this to most of their customers, use MDT to build out your images. Configuration Manager can be used to actually construct base core images, and they actually document how to do that. The problem is that then you get into, or the challenge, I should say, is that you have to define an infrastructure. You're going to have to install Configuration Manager services on various machines, create a distribution point. You're going to have to then target various virtual machines that you want to use. MDT is a little more, well, I should say, lightweight, and we should be able to, by just having a file share, most corporations, most lab environments, most teams, when they do construct their image, their imaging lab is an office or desk somewhere in some lab somewhere, and it's just literally a small workstation box or a server box with an MDT console connected up over a private isolated network to 3 or 4 machines that they're imaging, or a virtual machine. In fact, in some people, the imaging environment is just one box, and they're spinning up all virtual machines, which is great. Virtual machines are a great way to create images. But so the overhead of actually adding Configuration Manager, trying to use it in a management domain, we're not trying to manage these boxes at all. All we're trying to do is quickly install an operating system, add a couple applications, capture it, and store it back. So the overhead of a Configuration Manager really isn't required, and lightweight, and we can tweak it as necessary. But then MDT 2012 can also be used to deploy out, so it can be used as, and Microsoft does do this as well. They have MDT Light Touch as the deployment mechanism for the entire corporation. There are MDT Light Touch servers in pretty much every subsidiary around the corporation. And Microsoft also has a Configuration Manager infrastructure, and they're also doing kind of side-by-side deployment using configuration manager with MDT added onto it. So you can use MDT to add on some components. There's a new feature within MDT, well, 2010, it's not that new anymore, that allows you to actually add some wizards to help drive the process or help guide the user through an installation. Configuration Manager is great if you have a well-defined environment. You know exactly what every particular machine is supposed to do. You know exactly what applications are going to go. You send down a package, go, and there's no user interaction required. They don't get the choice. You run this at night, and by the time they arrive the next morning, their machine's been updated and ready to go. Great. But there are some cases, at least Microsoft has identified, where we have a good configuration manager infrastructure. We are managing every single machine, but we may want to send down a package and help guide the users through some of the questions. Maybe they know better of what they actually want. Maybe they want to be able to choose what applications they want or which operating system they actually need, which is a valid environment, and you're using Configuration Manager as a distribution mechanism. So that image engineering process, most common, and I think probably the, well, if you do know exactly what kind of hardware you have, you may be a Dell shop. I've been to some companies, they only have Dells, or I've been to some companies, they only have Lenovo's for their machines, which happens. Microsoft is very much exactly the opposite. We don't know what's out in the corporate campus. Prototype machines, new boxes, old boxes, all sorts of vendors, who knows? It's crazy. But for most cases, if you have like a test lab or a call center and all the machines are 100% identical, yeah, let's go ahead and create our base image on one of those physical reference pieces of hardware. During the reference process, we'll capture the drivers and that'll be ready to go, such that when it actually gets deployed out, yeah, that machine's ready to go. There's very little driver work that needs to be done. Easy. If you don't know what kind of hardware you're doing some detection. In that case, I might recommend actually constructing your image on a virtual machine. Now, this is where we have this reference client. This may be a case where we have a MDT server in a lab somewhere and a reference client we're taking a snapshot of. If you do have that, the hardware is standardized, you know what to do, great. Otherwise, virtual machine is great because also when you install Windows on a virtual machine, it won't install extra software, extra drivers. It will just keep it pretty basic, pretty slim, and then you don't have to worry about when you copy out some older drivers for your image. So a lot of people like using Hyper-V as the client for reference images. And the advantage is that, at least when I created them, I created one virtual machine, I grabbed the MAC address, I know exactly what that is, and I defined it in MDT, say, hey, whenever you see this MAC address, this machine with this MAC address, run this task sequence, which is the task sequence to install Windows 8. And capture the image and do a couple other things. It was great. We always, I could spin up the virtual machine, walk away, come back, and it should be done. All completely automated process. The imaging process will, and this is what the kind of the goal of MDT is. We're going to install an operating system, install an applications, and then capture that operating system back. Now, what are we installing that operating system? What is that operating system? That operating system could be the one you got from Microsoft, directly the retail CD from volume licensing, or it could be a captured image. So we can apply a captured image, install applications, and capture that again. Now there is a limitation with Vista and above. You cannot do sysprep on a machine more than, I think it's 3 times. So do be careful about that. In fact, that's one of the reasons why MDT has become so popular. Because in the past, a lot of people with Windows XP, they would create a standard reference image, capture it with Ghost. And then when Patch Tuesday came out the next time, they'd just apply the image, update it again, and do sysprep and capture it again. Then apply it constantly over and over again. So it was this image that kind of just grew over time, larger and larger and larger. And unfortunately, that doesn't work anymore because of the sysprep requirements. So coming up with an automated process to help out there really was one of the goals of MDT and where it really has excelled. So as I mentioned earlier, during the actual installation process, we're going to be we're going to start off by creating a deployment share. If you're starting off this from scratch, we're going to add operating systems, applications, packages, drivers, you name it. We're going to then build a task sequence, which I'll demonstrate here in a second here, and then do some configuration settings to set some defaults, some operations, and we're ready to go. Let's actually run this here. And I'm sorry, one of the problems with this is it's harder to get a client that runs consistently, and the entire setup process could take an hour. We don't quite have an hour here, so let's just, so Richard was kind enough to actually construct a video here. But this is a case of, this is a client that we're running here. This is a standard MDT client. We've booted up into on a machine. This is a virtual machine. And we're ready to actually do a task sequence installation. I'm going to hit the play button here. So this is booting up using WinPE. Now, this is a standard wizard that we can guide through. And we're also going to show off onto the side here an example of, let's see, play. Try that again, play. No, back. Doesn't like me. Huh. Give me one more second here. Escape out. Let me just close this out and try opening it again to see if it was my bad. It happens. Nope. File share desktop. No. The desktop. Hold this up again. Play. Go to screen. See all slides. We want go to here. Play. There it goes. So we can define a set of variables, custom settings, any file to help drive the process. By default, we're going to display most of the screens and the dialog boxes for running some of the tasks here. Let me rewind for a second. So here we have a list of task sequences. We also have a list of custom settings any file that we can use to define the process. By default, most of the dialog boxes are displayed, but we can actually skip various dialogues if we know what the variables are. Now, all of the inputs here are pretty well defined: task sequence variables, names, computer names, that sort of thing, can be defined and standardized using the deployment process. So if we wanted to automate this, this is great. Let me go ahead and hit play again here. So here we're going to kick off a task sequence and select it. And as we're going here, we can see here this computer name has already been defined in our INI file. And we're using product keys. In this case, product key page has not been skipped, so this is displayed. Most of these can be done manually, and for starting off, you can go ahead and run through the tasks, steps of going through and manually specifying these parameters as you go through. It's not a problem. But as you go through and as you start doing this more on a regular basis, you may decide to go into my custom settings any file, find the pages that need to be disabled, and continue. Here's most important: we're actually specifying where we want to actually capture the image to. We're going to capture it back to our deployment share. We're going to specify a file, and then we're going to kick this off. So once we've collected all of our information from the wizard and from our INI file, all the variables, we then run our task sequencer. Our task sequencer just runs through a series of steps here to do the full installation. It's already formatted the hard disk. It's already starting to apply the operating system. This is going to take forever. Let's see if he has a fade to black for the. Oh, there it goes. 99%. That was a fast installation. Those are great. So But that is taking our standard OS installation WIM file and applying it onto the hard disk, just slamming it in there, just kind of extracting it out with, like for those of you who are familiar with Ghost and other products, this is great. It's going to have to do a little bit of processing for the device drivers, at least for the virtual machine here, which is okay. And it's going to have to do that as well for during the OS installation for the actual product. There are ways to get around that if you're running in server environments and you know you're always going to be running on Hyper-V clients, which is fine. So during the installation of the operating system, MDT has added hooks into the operating system to say, hey, okay, when you're done with the installation, I want you to auto log on. I want you to start kicking off the task sequence again. And I want you to start running the rest of the scripts. This is where we really add our value, do our value add. We go ahead and start doing everything from installing applications, creating local groups, renaming accounts, you name it. This is a great opportunity to start modifying your standard image and making it exactly what you want. This is kind of the new out-of-box experience. You can disable this, by the way, this group policy to disable the logos for Windows 8. But Microsoft has included it. It is very valuable for those of you who've gone out and purchased your Surface or Surface Pros with the special deal here. Great price, by the way. It kind of helps guide most users through the process of learning some of the swipe features on the side. Okay, now we're actually auto-logged on to the operating system. We're continuing on with the installation. Now, in this particular case, wow, that MDT solution pack that I the example that I downloaded that's 18 gigabytes off the internet. These are all predefined from that pack. And this is great because we're installing UEV agent, we're enabling remote desktop, we're doing all sorts of configuration options that aren't available in the standard MDT. So this is a great opportunity if you're trying to learn MDT as well. Go ahead and download this, evaluate it, and figure out what you want. They have one script, for example, that removes all those Windows 8 desktop tiles from the start, the travel app and that sort of thing. You may decide, I don't want travel app in my, I don't want people traveling for my company or going out doing that sort of thing. So this is an opportunity to go ahead and remove some of those components, at least from a standardized business image, as compared to leaving that out for a consumer device. Are going to go ahead and install Office full version, although they do have examples in here of how to install click to run or local installation source. Click to run is a great new example of Office that allows you to run parallel to other versions, and it does dynamic installation. It boggles my mind. I still need to bone up on learning more about those features. It's really cool stuff. Remove default components. This is actually a script developed in this solutions pack, not included in MDT, but included in the solutions pack. So, sorry, you might have to download I think it's documented on Ben Hunter's blog on how to actually disable some of those default components, but that's quite common. This is one example of another way to do this. In the solution pack, there is an option in MDT to add manual steps. And this is kind of a great opportunity to discuss, at least for the manual steps, how to modify the start screen. For those of you who were around for the keynote this week, or at least for the foundation session by Mike Niehaus, I think he mentioned that there is going to be some new features in Windows 8.1 that allow you to programmatically manage the start screen. But for Windows 8, there's no way to really manage kind of the icon placement quite the same way that we had for Windows 7 and Windows Vista. So in this particular case, during our automated installation steps, we are actually added a pause where we can go out and modify, do some things manually. Maybe you have one script that you want to connect to that requires special credentials that you want a person to actually execute, which is fine. Or maybe you start off with the manual steps first and then try to automate as much as you can through the process. But in this particular case, we're going ahead and modify some of the start screen. You have a question?
What's it using to copy the profile under the 10.xml?
What's the?
Like all the customizations.
Yeah. So Ben Hunter also goes into, he has a blog I helped them with on how to modify the start screen. But yeah, start screen's a little funny in that they take the default user profile start screen and apply that to any new user. So you have to modify this at the very beginning. There's a copy profile option that says, hey, when you're creating a new user, let's go ahead and use the default profile on the machine for all new users. Otherwise, it would use a standard administrator. So when we do sysprep, we're actually capturing this local administrator account. And we can specify in this process, and this is what they're doing with this, the proof of concept kit, is that when we captured this, when we do a sysprep capture of this particular user, we can specify a flag that says, hey, now we want the profile, the desktop background, the color scheme, everything else, including the start menu layout, that should be applied to all future users. So that's how to do it. Hopefully they'll have that better solution for Windows 8.1, or sorry, a more enhanced version for 8.1 that allows us to, through group policy or other methods, I have yet to find out what it is, take the start menu and modify it the way we want. The particular problem with this is with the start menu, for example, if we do an apply of the start menu, if we add applications after the fact, they won't appear for all users. So really this only applies for the start menu layout you do, only applies to applications that were installed during the imaging time, which is which is probably another requirement that probably should be addressed when you're trying to evaluate whether applications go in or out. When you download packages dynamically per user, the icons will appear on the desktop for them, but it won't appear for other users. So if you install packages under a system context, like through Configuration Manager, it won't appear on the Start Menu desktop for the currently logged on user. It's very confusing, which is why I'm glad that they're actually trying to address that with some of the group policy changes moving forwards. But here, when we're done, we specified during our task sequence that we actually wanted to stop and capture the image back, which is great. That's exactly what we want to do. And we're done. That's kind of an overview of the process. In 24 minutes, this should be done. The machine shuts down. And on our deployment share, on our wherever share we specified, network share, we should find a WIM file that's pretty big. In this case, probably should be about 5 gigabytes. So let's do a quick little discussion here about some of the automation here. We had one example where we were doing some manual steps going through this. And probably when you start off with standardized, with MDT, you're starting off, you might have, you add in the manual step into your task sequence, and you'll want to do whatever, probably that section will probably be very big when you start off, because you may have some manual procedures that you want to do. But hopefully we can probably get that down, and the manual steps will be ported over to automated steps. And well, that was just an X copy. Let's add an X copy into one of the steps. Well, that's just kicking off a command line for that setup application. Let's add that as a step. So hopefully we're trying to get most of these down to some automated processes. I also just talked a little bit about start screen customizations. There's also some things they do mention down here that there are some things, some icons that don't get copied in, some applications that don't when you go back and forth. So do be aware of that. UEFI is coming up new, so do make sure you work with your deployment guys to make sure that you understand the ramifications of booting up into WinPE and taking care of UEFI. MDT was designed and tested. Most of the scripts do work with the latest versions of UEFI. They're really cool. The Surface machines, although I haven't had an updated Surface Pro machine, we do know that the MDT will work with that, should work with that. It does? Wow, you've already imaged it? Cool. I just bought one of those tablets yesterday. I haven't had a chance to do it, and I'm going to go back and probably try to image it myself. So,
You need the tech adapter, and I ran an off an SD card.
oh, true, and it doesn't work with regular USB. There are some other things that you should be aware about as well with MDT. But going into with UEFI, which are kind of interesting. There are a lot of blogs out there, and a lot of people who are trying to. A lot of Microsoft people have tried to figure out how to get that to work as well. But going into some of the scripting here, little time we have left. There are a couple of core components. Most of MDT, at least on the back end, most of the scripts, the tools written, were written in VBScript, and I apologize in advance for that. The technical reason is MDT can actually deploy Windows XP all the way through to the latest Windows 8. And the only scripting language that is available on XP, Vista 7, Windows 8, and WinPE, at least all the versions, the only scripting language that's available is WinPE. And MDT wanted to make a goal. When we designed it, we want to make a goal to make this as public as possible. So whereas some configuration manager may have a lot of components that are compiled, written in C, you don't know what the functionality is in the background. MDT is almost all the functionality is VBScript, and if you want to know exactly what it was doing, go ahead and crack it open and read it and modify it and change it. A lot of people do that, which actually is great because if you are blocked by something, you may, hey, MDT guys didn't really account for this sort of thing, this weird, unusual case, they aren't doing the correct processing here. Go ahead and modify it. Actually file a bug, but modify it. You shouldn't be blocked. You shouldn't have to call up Microsoft and say, this product doesn't work, we're blocked, we can't finish our deployment, I'm in trouble, how do we do this? It's all available. And when we use VBScript, we also use this Windows Scripting Host component, which allows you to use these MDT libraries. There are a couple of ones that are important here. ZTI utility is probably the most important. There are a couple other utilities if you need to access disks or if you need to access the BIOS or networking utilities as well. But really, when it comes down to it, it's just really a, let me go back here. It really is just a VB file. And for those of you who are familiar with VBScript, it should be ready if we do Adura WSF, Notepad, a ZTI wipe disk. So this is a script that will format the hard disk, and this is a standard VBScript file. Now, we use this Windows Scripting Host component, which is XML, and it allows you to include libraries. So the first step here is we're going to include the ZTI utility. Now, why do we do that? Because there are a couple of standardized routines. If you are going to automate and write scripts, you can go ahead and do whatever language you want. But if you write it using this standardized MDT scripting component, you can get access to the logging. You can get access to the environment variables that were created and some other commands that are quite common. Like, for example, if I need to connect up to a network share, I can use the MDT internal components to say, I need to connect up to this network share. And the MDT will say, oh, I already collected your credentials. I already have those encrypted and saved on local machine. I'm actually going to connect up to this network share for you using the correct credentials just to make sure that we're up and running, which is great. It saves you the trouble of hard coding net use commands into your scripts and things like that. So some of the more important things, the environment, being able to grab environment variables created by MDT, the computer names that we collected up in the environment, also some environments, networks, WMI already been created for you. Most scripts go into the scripts directory, but I do be careful about extending that because if you ever update your MDT deployment share, if MDT 2013 comes out here in a couple of months, you may copy over, replace some of your files, so do be aware of that. These are probably the top 8 or so functions or features, methods that are available in MDT. The ability to write to the logging file with the create event, create entry, be able to grab some environment variables, and also that utility functions. How do we find a particular file in standardized paths? Sometimes MDT will take some utilities and store them locally, but they're hard to find. And that utility validate connection. So we can use it, say, so validate a connection to my network over here. And MDT will try to connect. Oh, it didn't work. Got access denied. I'm going to try it with the credentials. So it does that automatically in the background without you having to hard code the network credentials. So again, this is just a sample script file, which works out really great here for standard applications. I'm going to skip over the demo here. We're getting close on time. Just another thing, now that the ADK supports PowerShell in WinPE, MDT also added PowerShell, the ability to call PowerShell scripts from the script host. We create our own PowerShell script host in the task sequencer. So the idea is and we provided a new drive object called TSENV. So where normally in PowerShell, let's see here, just a quick demo, PowerShell, you can get a directory listing of env. And that should dump out all the environment variables, local environment variables on the system. This is just standard PowerShell. This doesn't have to do with MDT. MDT added TSENV, and it works just like the ENV. So if you're in a PowerShell environment, you could write your own PowerShell scripts, get access to this TSENV variables, which is all the variables used by MDT, and you can modify them, write them, read them, do whatever you want. There's an example, do a dir TSENV, it'll pipe it out to the console host. And anything you write out to the screen, either through write host, write error, write warning, will appear in the standard BDD logging and tracking information that gets run as well. Mike Niehaus and I have done presentations in the past, I think they're up on YouTube, of how to debug or track down problems with your scripts and your installation environment. So go ahead and look for that on YouTube, and I have those as well. There are also some automation you could do actually constructing the MDT deployment share, and this is what the toolkit that we have from the proof of concept kit actually does. We'll programmatically build up an MDT deployment share when moving forwards using some of these commands. These are available, and they have some examples in the hands-on labs. There's some labs downstairs, for example, that you can run and evaluate and check, try out to construct an MDT deployment share. And it'll actually show you some of these commands and actually building out a deployment share and how these are actually constructed as well. I'm going to skip over that. But that is kind of the basics here. Again, I mentioned that I did an instructor-led lab yesterday, but the labs, there's a lab for how to build an MDT Light Touch deployment share from scratch. That's actually available if you walk downstairs and actually do those hands-on labs. Those are fun. A lot of work, but amazing how much they actually have down there. There's also a lab for actually how to create an MDT task sequence and configuration manager. So they have a fully functioning configuration manager environment with a client machine, Pixie ready. MDT is already installed. You just have to integrate the components, and you run through the process of constructing an MDT task sequence. That also works out pretty well. I'm pretty much going to end up here and say that there are some other, that's not a resource. There are other places to go for learning about MDT. There are other tracks available here at TechEd. Johan has sessions related to drivers that are advanced. There are other sessions related to other parts of MDT. Of course, as attendees, you should be able to watch those online, hopefully in 24 hours. So that will work out great. It's kind of a resource available for how to use that. I am also going to be down in the booth if you have any questions moving forward. We're short on time, so I don't have time for questions. But please come down and ask questions if you are curious about doing this, about what kind of questions, what resources you need. I am available down in the enterprise deployment booth for the next couple of hours after lunch. And thank you very much. It's been fun. Please fill out your evaluations, and yeah, thanks.